Hello, I'm Zorab and this is Byther Farm, and today, well, it's time for a May Homestead Garden Tour. These ducklings aren't necessarily part of the garden, but they're very much part of our homestead. Hello babies! They're also really nervous around me. Our huge elderberry tree is in full flower at the moment. The smell here is gorgeous, and although I could be really tempted to make lots of elderflower cordial or even champagne from it, I'm actually going to leave them all on the tree and let them turn to elderberries, because we really like elderberry jelly, don't we, boy? And Mr. J is very partial to elderberry wine. All of our damson and plum trees along this stretch came through the winter really well, and they're really quite well laden with young fruit that will ripen over the next few months, and it looks like it's going to be a good harvest from them this year. Everything in the food forest is becoming quite mature now. It's its third year here. The pheasant berry, which is a Lycisteria fulmosa, didn't get knocked down by the frost this year, so I have a feeling this is going to get way taller than me. It's already smothered with flowers, which is looking good. The currant bushes, and these are the ones that I've taken lots of cuttings from, are just heaving with berries, with currants. I'm feeling really hopeful, really positive for lots and lots of fruit from our homestead this year. The annual vegetable garden is really starting to fill up now. Lots of things I planted by seed, either in the greenhouse or in the polytunnel, I've now got into the ground. We're harvesting lots and lots of strawberries. We've had the right combination of sun and rain to make the really beautiful, big, red, very sweet strawberries. They're delicious. I've been doing lots of interplanting this year. So in the asparagus bed, I've planted lots of lettuces. So a lot of weeds come up, and I'm managing to clear a bit at a time. Hopefully I'll get all the weeds out before they go to seed. So asparagus and lettuce, and I think next year I will get strawberries in here, because asparagus and strawberries are a really good combination to be growing together. In this bed I've got onions, lettuces and brassicas, and that's why it's covered. There's a few turnips in here and some Chinese cabbage. I've also popped some celeriac in here, so it's a real mixed bed. I'm just going to experiment a little bit and see how nicely these mixed crops grow together. And again, this is a mixed bed with carrots and parsnips and celeriac and pieces of wood, where I've sown some more carrots, watered them, put the wood on top of them just to stop the water evaporating and to help them germinate better. In these two beds I've got 2 rows of potatoes on the outer edges, and then peas planted in the middle. These ones are a purple podded pea, and on that side is a mange tout. I think this is Oregon sugar pod, I think that's what it's called. Anyway, they're not quite ready, but they're very close to flowering. I'm really looking forward to getting our first mange tout, and that should then follow a couple of weeks later, or maybe a month later, with the purple podded ones there. And as best I can, I'm trying to do successional sowing so that we have a sort of constant supply of fresh vegetables throughout the season. This bed was unused last year. It was just covered over, and rather than create another raised bed, I've planted straight into the ground. So I've got 4 rows of sweet corn, and this is a variety called Special Swiss, and 2 rows of dwarf yellow French beans, and that's a variety called Polka. And then back here I have got broad beans. These are looking great. We've got 4 or 5 trusses of flowers on those, so I've now started pinching out the tips and eating those, and they're lovely. Not had broad bean growing tips before. I threw them into a stir fry, so it wasn't really a fry, it was just a mixed veg thing, and they just taste a bit like, well, they were quite spinachy in the end. I was expecting them to taste of broad beans, but Mr. J and I both thought it was a little bit more like spinach. That was great because it was an extra crop that we weren't expecting to have, and the idea of pinching out the growing tips is to help avoid some of the black fly, which I've just noticed has arrived on one of the growing tips that I have pinched out. Over here are the first lot of potatoes I put in. These were my experimental potatoes. They went in early March. They're just starting to show signs of flowering, so it really won't be very long before they're ready. Some more strawberries here. I'm looking forward actually to harvesting these, and then I'm going to clear them out of this bed because these ones I think are 4 years old now. These are the ones that were here when we moved in. Well, they weren't here, but they were on the homestead when we moved in. So they will go into a resting place. I'll just plant them out in the food forest somewhere, but it means I can use that bed for another crop. This is a mixed bed. This is my grow a gift bed. Actually, I've put all sorts of things in there, a whole mixture of plants. We'll see how that gets on. On this side there's a few onions. Those were autumn planted onions, so they're nearly ready. A lot of them are red onions, and they are already going to flower. So I'm going to lift all the ones that are going into flower, discard the really outer leaves, use these leaves to chop up, put in the freezer, chop up the bulb and rescue what I can of that. So these aren't going to waste, but I don't really want to leave them with these long flower spikes on them any longer than I need to. The artichokes here are looking fabulous. This one's probably a little bit big now, but these two are looking great, and there are plenty more over this. It was really just one artichoke plant. I've got the bean canes tied in to our very splendid bean support. These feel really solid, really sturdy. I'm really looking forward to the beans growing up this and seeing how it copes with the weight of the beans on the poles. I am convinced that this support will be stable enough. Whether the bean poles will be strong enough, we'll have to wait and see. This is the rose that I took as a cutting in our last house. We were in a rented house, and there was this pretty red rose tucked right into a corner, in a very dark shady corner. I took a piece with me in the hope that would grow, and here we go. I'm really pleased. For the last year it has been here, it's been putting on lots and lots of growth, and now it's covered in flowers. They don't smell very much, but it is really pretty, and the idea is that it will scramble up and over this archway, and I think by next year it will have reached the top. This is beautiful. I'm very, very pleased with it. Looking down the patron's garden, there's a new cottage border there. This is the long border. This is really starting to come into flower now, with geraniums and irises, Norcia. There are just loads. I've even got delphiniums beginning. So this is a purely ornamental border, except for half a dozen turnips that I tucked in at the front there because there was a space for them, so why not? And this is my edible flowering garden. So this is chard. Yes, it's going to flower now. I'm going to wait for the flowers and collect the seeds. It's calendula. There are some lettuce in here. Whole manner of things. I will make a separate video talking through everything that's in there. This archway I put in, it's made from a cheap and cheerful Polytunnel frame. One of those ones that just has a loose cover that comes over the top of them. but it was quite low, and so we decided to raise it up. And to do that, I've used part of a trampoline, an old discarded trampoline that came from my neighbour. So these are the poles, and then to give it some stability because of the strong winds on this site, I've put in a T-post into the ground, but even that I didn't think would be strong enough. So I've been busy creating a raised bed that goes around these poles, so that the T-post doesn't just go a foot into the ground, it also has a foot of soil in a raised bed to give it some more support. So here's that raised bed. I'm in the process of filling it. It was a hugelkultur style again, so there's been logs have gone into it, and sticks and compost and wood chip. These are some old lavender pieces from trimmings from last year, and I'm getting lots of homemade compost in it, and also some bought in topsoil, and I'm hoping that this will give this the extra stability it's going to need. It does feel like it is, and there is my beloved Gertrude Jekyll rose, which is just about to come into flower, so I'm not going to move it right now. And this bed, I used to have the rhubarb in it. I've lifted the rhubarb. It will go back in there once I've raised the level up, and I'm still undecided yet whether I will raise the soil around that rose. And what I'm hoping, if I do that, that it will root on each of the stems coming up, and then I'll have several separate plants, or just one very strong plant. I'm still a bit undecided, need to do a little bit more research to find out whether that would be a good idea or not. I'm actually sitting on a little seat that I made on the raised bed here. I'm going to do this again in other raised beds, because actually having a little seat to prop on to work at is a really good idea. The polytunnel, everything in here is growing really well, including a Monty cat I can see at the back there. I'm really pleased with all this. I'm starting to notice a few holes in things, so whether that's birds coming in eating, or whether slugs have arrived, I'm not sure, but yeah, very pleased with this. And on this side is my slightly chaotic and jumbly, what I'm calling my market garden, because it's a long straight rows. I'm growing market garden style. I think we learn from experience. My experience with this is I need to be more organised. I need to do more weeding. I've lost my garden hoe. It's here somewhere. I just haven't found it. So at the moment I'm having to hand weed, which is a bit of a nuisance. But I think next year, better planning, better preparation, and this will do much better. The fruit trees are all really heavily laden this year. I'm probably going to have to come through and thin some of these apples, much as I want to leave them all on there. Where there are 15 or 20 apples on one small branch like this, it won't take the weight. We'd be better off to remove some of them and just let a few of them grow on to be good tasty apples. Hopefully by the time I do the end of June tour, we will have harvested some potatoes, all our squashes will be in the ground, and the garden will be looking even more full than it is now.